Hey guys, so how many of you or how many of us have gotten the recent vaccine to fight against COVID-19? Many of us have been pressured to take the vaccine for work, school, or almost any essential activity in daily life. But how legit are these vaccines and do we even need them, right? From the articles that I've found, they reveal that we should ask some important questions before being influenced into doing something, whether it be getting the vaccine or being forced to stay inside for the lockdown, right? Is it reasonable? We're going to dive into that. The recent pandemic has turned all of our lives upside down. And during this crisis, it seems that some people have made the situation more confusing and stressful than deemed necessary. And when I say people, I'm alluding to mainly news outlets and their coverage and how they are prioritizing profits over providing honest and accurate news coverage for the people. So today I will be addressing how the pandemic is being exaggerated, why we should be questioning our main news outlets, and look at what we can do at an individual level to properly assess the level of intensity to our current situation. So for the last 2 years, the world has been faced with the global pandemic. And with this came a lot of uncertainty and fear, which is understandable when first introduced to a new situation such as this. However, after a certain point, one must look at the situation and adjust our outlook as we learn more and gain more information as we progress through the pandemic, right? Having a more accurate understanding of what is happening should give us a better peace of mind because we can then form a more appropriate approach to solving the problem. Now, this leads me to believe that the pandemic has not been handled in this manner and has been blown out of proportion in terms of urgency, right? And so we can see that. Let me go and show screen share here. Let's see. Share here. Go right there. This camera. Oop. All right. And so what do I mean by this? So looking in the wrong areas. So this is one of the examples that were put up from one of the main news outlets, just bringing up mainly the increase in cases of COVID-19. Now, if you've been watching the news over the last 2 years, you can see that most news outlets, they like to cover COVID cases. And I think that's the wrong area that they are looking at because it's like skewed data, right? It's like depending on where you look, you're going to find the problem that you're looking for, right? So let's dive into where they should be looking into. What we should be looking at, mortality rate, and that's very essential. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, we can take a look at the numbers that are provided. So currently the numbers are total cases that have been recorded is about 8.0 million COVID cases. How many deaths? About roughly around just under 80,000 has been recorded, right? And so a lot of news outlets, they don't like to cover this for some reason, because if you do the math to calculate mortality rate, you calculate the deaths, right, which is around 80,000, and you divide it by the sum total of cases that are out there, which is 8 million or so. And so we do the math and so we do the math. There we go. We do the math and we see that it actually doesn't, it's about 0.00985%. So it's not even a full 1% of a mortality rate, because we're taking a look at this like, whoa, it's a fraction of a percent. So then you must ask yourself, okay, so if that's the case, like, why are we forcing these lockdowns and mandates and stuff, right? And so it makes you really question, like, okay, has the news coverage been accurate in terms of urgency to the actual, intensity of the pandemic? And so that's enough of that. And all right. All right. And so one of the big reasons that this issue has been blown out of proportion boils down to the people who are distributing the news, which are the mainly big news outlets, right? How can this be? Isn't the news supposed to provide us with honest and unbiased news? I wish that was the case. The problem with today's news is that much like other business entities in terms of digital media and stuff, they tend to rely on people tuning in and watching their content. It's like how many people are tuning in and watching it. That's how they get, their money from it. So this becomes a problem when putting exaggerated headlines and exaggerated coverage gets more views than the truth, right? So instilling fear causes people, and the reason why is because it instills panic, and that creates for the viewer an incentive to continue watching. Even though it's not accurate, you're just getting more people listening because they're like, oh, with these outlandish headlines. Now, this problem is not getting any better. And in fact, many say that the country hasn't felt any more polarizing than any other time in history of our country. Who is to blame for this issue? As we mentioned before, all fingers point towards these news outlets for these types of business practices, for these media coverages. Now, with all this, we can take a look at another example. For example, this is just one news outlet. I'm not targeting them, but the CNN director came out recently. This is Charlie Chester. He came out on, and there's a video of him saying this. He said in quotes, I am 100% going to say it. He says, quote, I'm 100% going to say it, that if it were for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out, end quote. Now, that's just one example, but this is a CNN director who is directly saying that, yes, we are, cherry picking on how we're distributing news and how we're going about it. And so that's very concerning because it's like, well, now you know that, it's not the fiduciary duty is being eliminated when they're providing the news to us, the public. Right now with this dread, right, what can we do as individuals to combat this, right? In order to take the first steps into rectifying this issue, it would be to make it illegal for these news agencies to conduct themselves in a manner that spreads misinformation, right? So that would be the big one. And this would ensure that news outlets can only provide objective news and eliminate the unnecessary commentary that we see today. Something we can do right now on an individual level in a free market economy is to simply stop watching news outlets that display these types of unprofessional behaviors. And then so you can just do your own due diligence. Now, the problem with that now is that with life, everybody's really busy now with work and school, and that we rely on tuning into the news and relying on them to be honest with us. Now we've seen in recent news that that's not the case. And so now it's going to take a little bit more effort on our part as the individual to do our own due diligence and to look into it and to fact check with different sources to see what's really going on. And the cost of implementing these changes would only cause these news outlets to suffer the most because, now we're taking away their main scheme of making profits and we're taking that away from them. So today we went over media coverage and the recent pandemic, why we should be questioning our main news outlets, and what we can do on an individual level to be better informed citizens. So thank you guys for tuning in. I do appreciate it. And you guys have a wonderful time.